You ever have that game or show or just a moment from a piece of media that used to like scare the uh, poop out of you? Of course you did. You're not some fearless rat or something. It's interesting that video games specifically can invoke like a really distinct fear in a lot of us. Maybe it has to do with like being in control, or maybe it has to do with a game feeling a bit more seamless and compared to something like a movie, I guess. And now you might be wondering, okay, what the fuck does that have to do with Mario 64? I'll get to that. But I gotta preface the story a little bit. So I was, and honestly still am, a big fraidy cat baby idiot goo goo gaga. Saying I'm anxious is definitely an understatement. Well, actually, maybe it's a normal statement because of my anxiety, but point is, I get scared really easily. Me and horror, anything? No. I will genuinely be petrified. I probably just won't move forward in the game, or I will just like go get out of the room during a movie. If you put me in a line for a roller coaster, I will probably be jumping over the fence of the line. So man, I must be really fun at parties, huh? And I've been this way basically my entire life. But a normally young child isn't really introduced to like horror stuff or roller coaster stuff, so my fears came from children's media. And lucky for me, it didn't take much to scare me. Enter Mario 64. So my parents actually bought Mario 64 when I was like an itty bitty, barely past a fetus baby. I was born in the summer of 1996, and this cursed video game came out that November. So my parents didn't have a huge interest in video games, but for some reason they really fell in love with Mario 64. So growing up from the ages of like 1 to 3, I guess I'd experienced Mario 64 through them, and maybe my older brother who was like, 4 to 6 at the time or whatever. But something in that game really scared me, like petrified me even. And I know what you're very much justifyingly thinking right now. Oh, don't worry, Richie, I was scared of the eel too. Or, oh, I totally get it, that piano was spooky. Or even, hey, honestly, I get you, Bowser had a really freaky presence. But it wasn't any of those things, honestly. I couldn't even get to know if I was scared of those things because I couldn't even get past the title screen.
Hello.
Yep, I'm dead serious. The iconic Mario head on the title screen scared me shitless. Like, it really, really did. Both of my parents can contest to this. I was like genuinely terrified of this. It was this like irrational fear that stuck with me for years. But why would I be scared of this funny Mario head with a big goofy smile? Well, let me sit here and try to defend my 5-year-old self for just a second. So honestly, I think it really came down to the model itself. The model is like just old enough to be really uncanny, but like impressive enough for the time to be decently realistic. It moves with a lot of fluidity, and it had these like details that really stuck out in my brain. It has kind of those like weird sunken eyes that a lot of old models had from back then. And also, call me crazy, but this looks like just off model enough to even make it more uncanny. I still to this day feel this model is kinda weird compared to a lot of models, even at the time. Obviously this may be like one of the first Mario models ever made, but still, it's just kind of ominous. A floating Mario head with this dark background just sort of waiting to greet you on the title screen. Like if you told someone without context to Mario 64, oh, so you boot up the game and Mario's head's just floating in a void and you can just take his hand and stretch parts of his face and break his model and make his pupils stick out of his face. But yeah, for one reason or another, it spooked me. But the sad thing about this is I loved Mario back then. I think probably because of games like Mario 64 and Mario Party and later Paper Mario, I was obsessed with this plumber fucker. He was like my favorite character ever, bar none. And knowing that I couldn't play like one of his arguably most popular games really bothered me. I remember trying to play it by like covering my eyes and mashing start on the title screen, and then just like turning the game off before I'd get a game over because it was also on the game over screen. But even then, the looming fear that this thing was like in the game kind of freaked me out. Like who knows if the game would just like hard cut to it or something, or it'd be an enemy. Like ugh, god, even thinking about that kind of freaks me out. But you know, over time, I handled the fear on my own pace and I was able to get over it and enjoy the game, right? Haha, did you forget I had an older brother? He tortured me with this fear. Back in the day, CRTs sometimes had these like specific channels for reading component cables. Usually ours was like channel 3, so you'd switch it to channel 3, and if you turned on the console and the TV read that there was a signal coming from the component cables, it would just play out what's on there. So my brother would basically turn the channel to that, hide the N64 over a blanket or something, turn on Mario 64 and leave it on the title screen, so when I went to watch TV, I'd turn it on and boom! Usually the game's demo was playing, but sometimes it was the Mario head, and it scared me. It like fucking freaked me out, and I'd run out of the room like screaming. And I distinctly remember trying to get him in trouble for it and like tattling on him, and my dad would also be laughing about it and thought it was funny too. Note that both my brother and my father are fine human beings. It just was probably a lapse of judgment on their part, and my brother was like 6. So yeah, I didn't really get over this fear anytime soon because of that kind of stuff. I actually hid the game behind like a big bookshelf for literally years. And honestly, not a day went by where I didn't think about it. Maybe that might sound dramatic, but it's kind of true. It like haunted me. I only really saw it a few times realistically. I didn't get a chance to really let it settle in my brain, if that makes sense. So my perception, based on just those memories, made it probably a lot scarier than it actually was. But I was too terrified to even face it. And eventually I became even more into Mario, like Super Mario Sunshine came out, and that became like one of my favorite games, and that was basically a sequel to Mario 64. But in 2004, the Nintendo DS came out, and I got Mario 64 DS for Christmas with the console, and I distinctly remember having this weird mix of excitement and fear. And at that point, I hadn't really played Mario 64 in like years. I haven't even like really seen it, but I wasn't sure if I would be afraid of it. I think I was more afraid of actually finding out if I was going to be afraid of it or not, if that makes sense. But anyway, I remember popping it in and... Mario. It was different. The best way I can describe this is it was less uncanny. It felt more like a normal Mario model. Plus, stretching it was only done via like a drawing version of him, but much less impressive, but much less terrifying. And honestly, that experience playing Super Mario 64 DS for the first time was like one of my most cherished video game memories. It felt like some lost Mario game I had never been able to play before, which is really funny considering it's Mario fucking 64, like one of the most iconic games ever made. Eventually, when YouTube started becoming more accessible, I actually spent some time facing this fear that I was so stunned by as a kid. There was a point when I was maybe like 12 where I was like, wait, this is silly. And nowadays, I mean, I made a thumbnail with it, so how scared could I be? It's a strange concept in retrospect. A game that would go on to be one of my favorite games of all time, I wasn't even able to really play during my most informative years. If I didn't have that fear, I know Mario 64 would be like my game, a game that would be so engraved into my soul. But honestly, because of the fear, it still kind of is. Huh. Maybe that's why I have such an attachment to it. But I will still stand by the fact that that thing is very strange and uncanny. I don't care what you say. Anyways, that's kind of my Mario 64 story. I just kind of wanted to talk about this. It's a weird topic that I don't really talk about super often for some reason. It comes up whenever like my history with Mario 64 comes up in conversation with people, but it's just weird. It's just a weird story, you know? Like I said in the beginning, I was a scared kid. I had fears in a lot of games. It's pretty common. Nowadays, horror games are like all the rage with like young kids, and I'm like, damn, like these kids are fucking powerful, man. And let me know if you had a similar experience. Or didn't and think I'm a fucking loser for being like that for so long. Okay, anyway, bye.